Making a health smoothie in your own kitchen is, it's a deeply forgiving process.
Oh,
You
completely.
just throw in like a handful of spinach, a heavy pour of oat milk. Maybe you accidentally drop in 2 scoops of matcha powder instead of 1.
Right.
And the absolute worst thing that happens is your drink tastes a bit grassy and you feel jittery for an hour.
Exactly. You might be a little hyper, but you're fine.
Yeah. But taking that exact same nutritional concept, scaling it up to a commercial level, and trying to sell it on a store shelf.
That's a whole different ballgame.
It really is. Suddenly you're operating in this unforgiving reality where a rounding error on a single milligram can trigger a federal compliance issue or a forced recall or even a lawsuit.
Well, the kitchen is fundamentally about intuition, right? While the commercial shelf is about rigorous, unwavering chemistry and legal compliance.
Right.
People like to think of wellness products as these, natural, holistic, earthy creations, but the reality behind the scenes is highly regulated supply chain management.
Yeah. And if you are an entrepreneur listening to this and you're planning to take the leap into the wellness industry, navigating that transition from kitchen intuition to commercial compliance is usually where your dreams just hit a brick wall.
They really do.
But there is a way through it. Today's deep dive is based on a comprehensive guide by Laurent Fabian from Ingredientsage. It's basically a blueprint for surviving this exact transition.
And looking at the landscape for 2024 through 2026 from the source material, the stakes for a new founder have literally never been higher.
No, they haven't.
Consumers are no longer impressed by, a pretty label that just promises energy or focus. They are demanding absolute traceability, clean labels, and a verifiable sustainability footprint.
Which means launching a brand today requires baking compliance into the very DNA of your product on the first day you sketch out the idea. So our mission today is to map out these practical steps, right, to get you from concept to store shelves without drowning in the details.
And we have to start with the most foundational physical reality of this business. Before you even think about designing a logo or building a sleek website, you have to decide how this physical product is actually going to get made.
The first major fork in the road.
Exactly. And the path you choose dictates your speed to market, your upfront capital, and your ultimate control over the formulation. You basically have 2 models to choose from: private label manufacturing or contract manufacturing, which the industry usually calls co-packing.
Let's unpack that. Because private label is basically the plug-and-play option, right?
Right.
You approach a manufacturer, and they open a catalog of ready-made stock formulations. They've already researched it, tested, produced it.
Done all the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
Right.
So you just pick like a pre-existing vitamin C complex or a generic pre-workout powder, and you put your brand's label on their bottle. The way I like to think about it is private label is like buying a spec house and just picking the paint colors.
That's a really great analogy.
Whereas contract manufacturing, that's hiring an architect to build your dream house entirely from scratch.
Spot on. And with that spec house, the private label route, the distinct advantage is velocity. Because the research and development phase is bypassed entirely, your time to market is incredibly fast. We're talking weeks to maybe a few months rather than a year.
And your upfront costs are lower, I'd imagine.
Significantly lower. You aren't paying a team of chemists to figure out how to keep the powder from clumping in the machine, because the manufacturer solved that exact problem 3 years ago.
But the trade-off is huge.
Huge. It's a total lack of customization. You might be able to request a specific flavor or choose whether it's a gummy or a capsule, but you're not creating a novel formulation. You are selling the exact same underlying product as potentially dozens of other brands.
Just with a different marketing story wrapped around it.
Exactly.
So then you have the custom architect route. Contract manufacturing. You hire a co-packer to build your formula from first principles. You dictate the sourcing of the lion's mane mushroom, the precise milligram count of the B12, the binding agents. It is your intellectual property.
Yes.
But that level of control has to massively shift the timeline and the budget.
Oh, it shifts it completely. The upfront R&D, the pilot runs, the analytical testing costs, they are all significantly higher, and the timeline really stretches out.
Right.
But the long-term payoff is that contract manufacturing often results in much better unit economics once you actually scale up to large volume production.
Which is where you want to be eventually anyway.
Exactly. And more importantly, you own a product that is uniquely tied to your specific brand promise. It creates this defensible moat around your business because no competitor can just easily replicate your exact formula.
Okay, I want to challenge a common assumption here. because this seems like a massive legal trap for a first-time founder.
Go.
Let's say I go the private label route. The manufacturer is the one sourcing the raw ingredients. Their employees are running the encapsulation machines. They're bottling it.
Right.
So if a private label manufacturer is providing the formula and doing all the work, don't they carry the legal risk if something goes wrong? Like if a batch goes out contaminated with heavy metals, their legal team takes the hit, not mine, right? Because they physically made the error.
Oh, that is the single most dangerous misconception a new founder can hold.
Really?
Yes, the regulatory agencies do not view it that way at all. Regardless of which manufacturing model you choose, the brand owner, the entity whose name is printed on the front of the bottle, bears the ultimate legal and regulatory responsibility.
Wow. So I'm on the hook.
100%. You are the one putting that product into interstate commerce. You're accountable for substantiating any claims made on the packaging. You are responsible for monitoring post-market safety. And you are liable for the accuracy of the label.
So the manufacturer just executes the batch based on a contract.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are the one standing before the consumer and the regulator.
So you can outsource the labor, but you can never outsource the liability.
Never.
Owning the brand means owning a massive legal target on your back if a single milligram is off, which I guess means we need to talk about the FDA.
We definitely do.
Yeah.
Because understanding the FDA's rules is the immediate mandatory next step. The regulatory framework for dietary supplements in the U.S. is governed by the FDA under the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act.
DSHEA. Yeah.
Exactly, DSHEA. And the operational rulebook you have to follow is outlined in 21 CFR Part 111, which dictates the current good manufacturing practices, or GMPs.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit.
Yeah.
Because the source guide highlights some specific FDA enforcement priorities for 2024 to 2026.
Yes, they are hyper-focused on three main areas right now: substantiating marketing claims, scrutinizing NDI filings, and robust adverse event reporting.
Let's start with the NDI, the new dietary ingredient filing. Because the guide treats this as a highly sensitive area. If I find some rare botanical extract that hasn't been widely sold in the U.S., I can't just fill out a form and start selling it.
Definitely not. An NDI filing is a grueling, scientifically rigorous undertaking. If an ingredient wasn't marketed in the U.S. prior to October 15, 1994, you have to prove to the FDA that this novel botanical is safe for human consumption.
Which means what exactly?
It means submitting comprehensive toxicological studies, historical usage data, clinical safety profiles. You're basically trying to prove that taking this extract every day for 5 years won't silently degrade liver function or interfere with common medications.
That sounds incredibly expensive.
It's a high-stakes, capital-intensive process that most first-time founders simply cannot afford to navigate.
Good to know. And then there's the other priority, claim substantiation, where marketing collides with federal law.
Right. There is a very rigid line between what you can legally say a product does and what turns your supplement into an illegal, unapproved drug.
Which is the line between a structure-function claim and a disease claim.
Exactly. You are legally allowed to say your ashwagandha blend supports a healthy stress response or promotes joint flexibility.
Those are structure-function claims.
Yes. But the second you print cures anxiety or treats insomnia or mitigates arthritis, you have crossed into prohibited territory.
Because disease claims are strictly prohibited.
By using the words cure or treat, the FDA categorizes your powder not as a dietary supplement, but as an unapproved new drug. And they can and will shut down your entire operation.
Seize your inventory, issue crippling fines, all of it.
All of it.
Which brings us to the supplement facts panel, the most visible piece of compliance for any consumer. The source guide emphasizes that this panel is not a nutritional suggestion. It is a legally binding document.
It really is. It must meticulously list the serving size, the per-serving amounts, and every single dietary ingredient in order of predominance by weight.
And it goes deeper than just listing ingredients. You need a dedicated, perfectly accurate allergen disclosure statement.
Yes. The units of measurement, whether something is in milligrams or micrograms, must be exact. The daily values must align with the latest FDA reference standards. Even details about encapsulation materials or proprietary coatings that affect digestion have to be accounted for.
So the guide uses this phrase, quality by design, when discussing how to meet all these regulations. And honestly, for a scrappy founder working out of a rented co-working space, that sounds a lot like corporate jargon. What does quality by design actually look like in practice?
It basically means compliance isn't a final inspection at the end of the line.
Right. You don't just build it and then hope it's legal.
Exactly. Quality by design means treating regulatory readiness as a continuous discipline. For a founder, it means building a centralized evidence binder on day one. Every single claim you plan to make, every ingredient you select, needs to be supported by peer-reviewed literature, clinical studies, or internal analytical data.
So you basically assume the FDA is going to knock on your door tomorrow asking for proof.
Yeah.
And you have that binder ready to hand over.
Precisely. It's not a one-time checklist.
But if the FDA comes knocking, your evidence binder is only as good as the physical reality of how your manufacturer actually operates.
Very true.
You need a way to prove that what's in the binder matches what's inside the capsule, which requires a rigorous quality assurance, or QA, workflow.
And QA is really the engine that makes compliance possible. It begins long before the ingredients even reach the facility. It starts with supplier qualification.
Right, assessing the material cultivation, the chain of custody, lot traceability. You can't just buy raw materials blindly off some international bulk marketplace.
You really can't. You need to know if the farm where your herbs were grown has a history of heavy metal contamination in its soil.
But as a founder, I can't be at the factory floor standing over the vats watching every pill get pressed.
I love this analogy. I thought of for this. So QA isn't just the bouncer at the door of the club checking IDs. It's the bartender watching how much is poured, the security cameras, and the VIP list all working together. That is a brilliant way to look at it because you build this multi-stage validation trap. The source outlines a very specific sample workflow.
Let's hear it.
Stage 1 is raw ingredient testing upon arrival. Before any powder enters the facility's main floor, it's quarantined and tested for identity.
Basically proving it is actually the botanical it claims to be.
Right. And checked for potency in contaminants like microbes, pesticides, heavy metals.
So that's the bouncer at the door.
Exactly. Then stage 2 is the in-process checks. This is the mechanical reality of scaling up. If you're mixing a 500-gallon vat of powder, you have to ensure mixing uniformity.
Because you can't have all the active ingredients just settle at the bottom of the vat.
No, because then the first 100 capsules do absolutely nothing, and the last 100 capsules contain a toxic overdose.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be a disaster.
So the manufacturing equipment has to be calibrated to ensure homogeneous distribution. Then you reach stage 3, which is finished product testing. The final sealed capsules are tested for stability and to ensure the chemical makeup matches precisely what is printed on the label.
And this all has to be documented. QA is often misunderstood as just a policing function, but I compare it to a software developer's version control system.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, in software, if an app crashes, engineers don't guess what went wrong. They look at the commit log, they find the exact line of code written by a specific developer on a Tuesday at 4 p.m. that caused the bug. In the supplement industry, that meticulously detailed log is your batch record.
That is a perfect translation. The batch record tracks everything. Which operator ran the machine, the exact lot numbers of the raw ingredients, the temperature and humidity of the room during encapsulation.
Everything.
Everything. Because if a consumer reports a severe adverse reaction, that batch record is your only lifeline. You use it to instantly trace that specific bottle back to its origin.
So you can figure out if it was just an isolated barrel of raw material, or if your entire inventory needs a recall.
Exactly. Without it, you are flying completely blind during a crisis. And to add an objective layer of trust to this entire system, the guide strongly recommends independent third-party certifications.
Like NSF GMP, USP verification, informed choice, non-GMO project.
Right. These aren't just colorful badges to make the packaging look nice. They are objective, external validation that your internal QA systems actually work.
Which brings us to the packaging itself, because here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit tense.
The physical limitation.
Yes, you have a flawlessly compliant, meticulously tested supplement, but you have a 2-inch tall glass bottle. By law, you have to fit the massive supplement facts panel, an allergy warning, a barcode, a batch number, an expiration date, and all those third-party certification logos.
It's a lot of real estate.
And modern consumers demand transparent storytelling. How are you supposed to fit all these transparent sourcing stories and sustainability practices and high-contrast text on a tiny bottle without it looking like a software terms of service agreement?
Well, the short answer is you don't. You simply don't try to fit it all on the bottle. This is where founders often paralyze themselves. The solution from the source guide is to adopt a multi-channel strategy. a cohesive design language across your whole ecosystem.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly. The physical label handles the regulatory essentials, high contrast, legible typography for the supplement facts, the compliance logos, and maybe some tactile cues like a matte finish, that signal quality.
But the heavy narrative lifting moves off the bottle entirely.
Yes. You rely on your direct-to-consumer channels for that. Your D2C website is where you host the deep dive articles about your sourcing, where you publish your certificates of analysis.
So the physical bottle builds initial trust through strict compliance, and the website builds long-term loyalty through education.
Precisely. And speaking of the bottle, sustainability is non-negotiable now. Consumers demand drop-in packaging solutions.
Meaning materials that easily integrate into existing recycling infrastructure, right?
Right. Reduce plastic footprints, post-consumer recycled materials, refillable glass systems. It's a baseline expectation in 2024 to 2026.
Okay, so we've dissected the manufacturing models, the rigid FDA regulations, the QA version control system, and the packaging ecosystem. The final piece of the master plan is timelines and budgets.
The execution phase.
Right. Now that we understand all these hurdles, how do we sequence these steps to actually launch without running out of money? Because the natural instinct is to work chronologically. Figure out the formula, find the ingredients, wait for them to arrive, then design the label.
If you approach a launch in a strictly linear fashion, the process will take 2 years and you will bleed capital every single month. The secret to a successful, capital-efficient launch is parallel processing.
Running work streams at the same time.
Exactly. The typical phases: concept and formulation, analytical testing, regulatory review, packaging, and distribution must overlap. You don't wait for your flavor profile to be 100% finalized before you start auditing your raw material suppliers.
So you're qualifying suppliers while your chemists are still tinkering with the sweetener.
Right. You submit preliminary label designs to your legal team based on the anticipated formula, rather than waiting for the final pilot batch to be pressed.
But running fast in parallel introduces a lot of financial vulnerability. So what does this all mean for the entrepreneur staring at their bank account? Because a founder has to manage dynamic budgets, variable costs like a spike in the price of botanical extracts, alongside fixed costs like contract minimums.
It's definitely a juggling act.
When you're moving that fast, a single supply chain shock can bankrupt a startup. How can a founder protect themselves when supply chains inevitably get messy?
You survive by anticipating failure before it happens. The guide advocates heavily for scenario analysis and building a formal risk register.
A risk register.
Yes. It's a living document utilized by your team that identifies every potential point of failure.
Like, for example, relying on a single, highly specialized farm for your core ingredient.
Precisely. The risk register names that vulnerability, assigns an owner on your team to monitor it, and dictates the remediation plan. If that farm experiences a flood, what is the immediate next step? The remediation plan is already having a secondary, pre-qualified supplier under contract.
Diversification.
Exactly. The guide even suggests maintaining an alternate packaging supplier on standby. Because if your capsules are ready, but your sole bottle supplier faces a shipping delay, your inventory just sits in a warehouse expiring while you pay storage fees.
Ouch. Yeah, anticipating failure isn't pessimism, it's just the hallmark of a resilient business.
It separates the amateurs from the professionals. The professionals have a backup plan for their backup plan.
All right, let's pull all these threads together for the listener. If you were preparing to launch a brand in this space, your journey begins with selecting a manufacturing path, wisely weighing the speed of private label against the control of contract manufacturing.
Right.
You must respect the heavy regulatory burden of the FDA, avoiding disease claims and treating the Supplement Facts panel as a legally binding document. You bake QA into every step to ensure your evidence binder matches your physical capsule. You design sustainable packaging that shares the storytelling load with your digital channels. And finally, you run parallel timelines and maintain a paranoid risk register to launch efficiently.
It's a gauntlet, but it is a navigable one if you adhere to the blueprint. But, looking ahead at the trends from 2024 through 2026, the source material brings up something really fascinating.
Oh.
The rapid rise of personalized nutrition. We are moving beyond static formulas into flexible manufacturing, where digital tools customize exact dosages for an individual client.
Which completely upends the traditional mass-produced model we just talked about.
It really does. It forces us to ask a very provocative question. If the trajectory of wellness is hyper-personalized formulation tailored daily to an individual's specific biomarkers or even their DNA, will the traditional concept of a mass-produced supplement brand sitting on a retail shelf even exist in a decade?
That's a wild thought.
Or will the brands of the future simply be highly regulated formulation algorithms analyzing our data and mixing exact microdoses on demand right in our own kitchens?
We started this deep dive by contrasting the forgiving, intuitive nature of making a smoothie in your kitchen with the rigid science required for commercial manufacturing. But perhaps the ultimate evolution of this industry is technology, bringing that perfect, rigorous commercial science right back to our kitchen counters, formulated specifically for an audience of one.
It's definitely something for you to ponder as you plan your lunch.
Absolutely, something to mull over as you build the future of wellness.